discuss a very important topic, revival of business and industry after the setback in pandemic period. Business standard has always helped us in bringing into public domain the issues of topical interest such as this, and I am more than certain that the deliberation would be pathfinding for all of us. Our moderator is Mr. Arup Roychoudhury, Assistant Editor of Business Standard, and the panelists are Padma Bhushan Sri Swapan Dasgupta, Member of Parliament, Mr. Shishir Bajoria, Chairman, IIM Shillong, and Advocate Mr. Narayan Jain. We also welcome Anindo Banerjee, our technical partner, RITAM Bangla platform. With this, welcome. I once again welcome you all and then hand over the mic to the moderator, Mr. Arup Roychoudhury. Welcome you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Adhikari ji. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Business Standard Smart Business Joint Webinar, which we are hosting along with the Concern for Calcutta, Rajasthan, Bengal, Maitri, Parishad, and Calcutta Citizens Initiative. Normally, in normal times, we would have held this in a auditorium or a seminar hall, and we would have had, after the event, we would have had high tea and some snacks, and we would have had greater interaction. But the situation is such that we are limited, and thanks to technology, we can at least interact with each other. So, gentlemen, obviously, I would like to start off today's discussion one by one with each one of you. Obviously, the topic is how does the industry restart and come out of what has been a once in a lifetime, once in a century pandemic. And all of us have seen different things in life. We have never seen anything like this. After 9 weeks, after 10 weeks of a lockdown, the nation is finally starting to come out, and the economy is being restarted again. So if we can start one by one, first by Mr. Jain, and then by Mr. Bajoria, and then by Padma Bhushan, Dr. Swapan Dasgupta, your initial opening remarks. Mr. Jain.
Thank you, Arupda. Friends, we are all aware about the current problem which is going on, and in the whole of India from 25th of March, the Honorable Prime Minister had declared the lockdown, and that is still going on for the time being till 30th of June. And I understand many states are insisting that it should continue for a further period. There are areas and states where the problem is more. So that is a decision to be taken by the government. Some reliefs have also been given by the government. Because of that, a lot of rush may be seen, and even the social distancing is not maintained. Many people are not using the masks. So, but these problems are there. This fear in our mind. এটা আমরা বাংলাতে বলছি ভয় মনে একটু ভয় আছে সবাদেরই সেজন্য even the places where the government has allowed to open the office or establishments, people by choice, they are not going to their offices because they are having a lot of apprehension our corona hoye jabe. So in this kind of situation is not a case that how we can have the confidence building. It is a very difficult exercise because it is the question of saving one's own life. Even if the gentleman in the family, he wants to go to his office, his wife and other family members are not allowing him to go down. So these situations are going on, but then the lockdown cannot be forever. The economic activities cannot be closed forever. So, jahan bhi hai aur jaan bhi hai. That is the new concept, the slogan given by the Honorable Prime Minister. And we have to live with the fear of corona, but taking full care. And in this situation, you see, since the month of March 25, in West Bengal, the lockdown actually started from March 21 by the local government. So now, March a few days, April, May and June, we have come almost middle of the June. In this period, whatever money people were having at home or the ladies were having at home, like my wife in my home, she told, so the situation may be similar with many families. And what is happening that there is no flow of money. Even the clients or the customers, they are not paying. And in this situation, it is quite difficult. The Honorable Prime Minister and the Finance Minister of India, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, they have announced a package, very big package of 20 lakh crore rupees to help various segments of society. That includes the farmers, that includes the laborers, that includes the MSME. Lekin, you see some people like MSME, they are saying that they'll mange more and they want something more. Now, what may be the more? You see, one is that you see the Honorable MSME Minister had already told the PSUs to release the money of the MSMEs. Now the suggestion of the MSME is that the ample orders should be released by public sector undertakings to MSMEs so that they can start their business. The government has already allowed, they have announced that whatever limit was there for the working capital in the month of February 2020, so they will get extra limit of 20%. But some industry is feeling that 20% is too low a figure. So maybe government may consider it to increase it to 40%. There are some MSMEs, they are registered as MSME, but they have not taken any loan. Now, because of this pandemic, their financial situation is not good. So they would also like to take the loan. Some banks are saying that if you have not taken any loan in the past, though you are MSME, we are unable to give you. So these are the hiccups which I think the Honorable MSME Minister and the Honorable Finance Minister will take care. The interest rate, the other day we had a webinar with the Honorable MSME Minister, Sri Nitin Gadkari ji, and there a suggestion was made to him that there should be interest subvention of 3%, or the interest which is being charged from MSME, that should be restricted to 5%. So the Honorable Minister, Sri Nitin Gadkari ji, he said that whatever he can consider, he will do it, and whatever is to be taken up with the other ministries, that also he will take care. So he was very positive in the discussion. And then you see those who are the manufacturer, exporter. The Prime Minister has said two things. One is Atmanirbhar, and that also includes that we need not import from other countries, but we should be, India should be exporter. So for doing that, the MSME should be encouraged, other industries should also be encouraged so that their export can be increased by giving some more facilities on packing credit. That will help them. The other issue is the workforce, the labor. We are all aware how the workforce, our brothers, they were very keen to go to their home state from various other states, maybe Delhi, Bombay or other places, South India. And they have, most of them, because of the special trains run by our Honorable Railway Minister, many of them have been able to reach their home states. Now the question is, now a time is coming when the industries are going to restart their operations. So they will again need the workforce. See, this confidence building exercise has to be made in the mind and heart of the laborers, that if they go back to the industry where they were working, then there is no harm. They will get all facilities, and those facilities, not only the question of assurance, those facilities should in fact be created. And the Prime Minister in that 20 lakh crore rupees package, the finance said that we will create the enough housing so that people have shelter. and such people have, of course, the labor force as well. And this is the time that those who are in the industry, housing industry, promoters, they should also help. They should work shoulder to shoulder with the government, and therefore providing the shelter to these kind of needy people. The priority should not be to make the profit, but the priority should be to work without profit, as the NGOs are working. If they can provide their help by providing such shelters, such housing on cost-to-cost basis, I think that will be a big service to the nation and to the workforce. Friends, I would just conclude with a few sentences, and that is that we are all aware how Japan, Nagasaki, and Hiroshima were affected in the Second World War. These were almost ruined. But because of the sincerity towards the nation, the Japanese people worked hard, and the country again became a very strong country. This is time, my very purpose of giving this illustration is that I most humbly request all my countrymen that we should be very faithful in all our responsibilities, whether we are in job, whether we are in profession, whether we are in business or industry, that we must act. Our only interest should be the good of the nation. We should faithfully work for that. And in next coming 6 months or so, there may be a difficult time, but then our working shoulder to shoulder in the interest of nation, I think we will be able to overcome this problem. Hum honge kamyab. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. Mr. Bajoria, if you may.
Thank you, Mr. Arup Roychoudhury. Thanks a lot. Honorable Member of Parliament, Dr. Swapan Dasgupta. I normally don't call you that, Dada. My dear, very dear friend, Shopanda. Narayan ji, I always refer to him as Bhaiji. Mr. Arup Roychoudhury, Adhikari ji, Pawan Pahadia ji, Ashok Purohit ji, and I must mention one name who I am seeing sitting very quietly is my friend Raju Babu. Shubhasanda. Narayan ji ended on a very, very strong note. What he said, patriotism. That is what delivered Japan after the devastation it faced. We all know one thing, ladies and gentlemen, the only country which has faced nuclear weapon in reality, not once but twice, is Japan. The rest has only been tests. And to come out of that devastation, the one and only prescription is where Narayanji ended, is their nationalist feeling. So when someone tells me that this is a nationalist party, I wonder what's wrong. In fact, I'm proud that there's a nationalist party at the helm of affairs. Today is day 80th of the lockdown. On a very personal note, don't believe what Narayanji said about there being no cash in his house. By cash, I don't mean he's an income tax advocate, so everything with him is accounted for. So that's on a very personal note. Let's discuss how the world has been changed post-COVID. Not post-COVID, by COVID. No pandemic in memory over years, centuries, has changed the world the way COVID has. By the way, what I believe is one of the weakest viruses that we have seen. Yet, it has devastated the world. BC is now before COVID, and AD has now become AC after COVID, which we are waiting for. But we generally call ourselves, since COVID has already attacked us, we are after COVID. Not that we have got rid of it. Very clearly, many businesses have come under pressure. Unfortunately, some of these businesses will fall down. The biggest hit is hospitality industry. which gives a lot of employment. But while these negatives are there, I'm not going into a list of what negatives are, because it's still not known what will collapse and what will be under pressure. Some have already started. But there are also new things which are coming. There are new opportunities. Every dark cloud does have a silver lining, at least I believe in that. The day lockdown, first day of lockdown, India did not make any personal protective equipment known as PPE, which we are all familiar with now. Those days we did not even know what PPE was. Neither did we know what an N95 mask is. Neither did we produce one. In these 80 days of lockdown, we are the world's second largest manufacturer of PPEs and N95 masks during the lockdown. That is our country's strength. And that is a new opportunity. While we were fighting this, we still are fighting this. In fact, we are fighting it far more. The numbers are ramping up. But we have also come to the world's rescue by the export of tablets. I'm now going to elaborate on the word Atmanirbhar Bharat, which the Prime Minister gave a call of. I've had the privilege of being in certain diplomatic exchanges where people ask, what does Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant Bharat mean? Will you close your country? Will you become an insular country? And many businessmen in India also think that way. And sometimes the criticism of Atmanirbhar Bharat becomes that. No, very clearly, if each one of us in this today's webinar, if we stand on our feet, we do not look for crutches, we become Atmanirbhar, we make our locality Atmanirbhar, we make our country Atmanirbhar. Now, how do we do this? In this process, if you see, the package announced was just not a financial package. With it, there were reforms also. Actually, in all these numbers, somewhere we have overlooked the reforms. Ladies and gentlemen, after 50 years, when Indira Ji did the coal nationalization, after 50 years, coal is now thrown open for private sector. This happened during this, when the packages were being announced. A real reform. Actually, we overlooked it. Now, coming from the industry, I can see the point that industry is asking a question, and I get this question very often. Why is the government offering me loans? Why is the government wanting to increase my indebtedness? So the question is, what do you want? Well, look, Japan has given 40% of its GDP. So-and-so country has given 25% of its GDP. This percentage GDP, that percentage GDP. So what about our 20% of GDP? No, but that is all by way of loans. Let me explain. The countries which we keep talking about is UK, USA, Japan, Germany, which is natural because after all, these are first world countries where and they have come with packages. With the benefit of practical experience in these countries, let me tell you exactly what package has been given to the industry. Not what percentage of GDP. What percentage of GDP then compare with 20% of ours. Germany, UK, USA have decided to subsidize a part of the wages if you sack the employee. If you sack the employee or send the employee on leave, forced leave, a part of it. Please compare that with our problem of migrant workers. You know why I'm comparing this? This migrant worker issue, try to analyze, it's in no other country. And why is it in India? And it's a reality in India. Look at our growth. regional growth, and that is where you will get the answer. The South and West together accounts for 2/3 of India's GDP, precisely 65%. North, 22%. East and Northeast, 13%. Strictly speaking, 4 regions each should have been 25. There would hardly be migrant workers. Now, if the West and South have 65% of the GDP, obviously they don't have people. And if East and Northeast have 13% of GDP, they have no employment opportunity. So, the migrant worker issue, and the government was then forced to allocate a fund for migrant workers when they come back to their hometowns, to their home states, because it is expected that they will be staying here before they go back. By the way, there is some news which is, I'm sure, which is positive. It's good, because after all, migrant workers would also want to go back to revive their livelihood, to get their job. People who work really don't look for roles. They want to go back to work. And in the other parts of our country where industry is flourishing, where even agriculture labor is needed, migrant workers are needed. There are states, there are businesses, this is not state-wise, but business-wise, which are offering twice the salary. One has gone to 3 times the salary to bring the migrant workers back. And I believe even in the state of West Bengal, in some districts and some villages, বাংলায় বলি এদের মধ্যে একটা দোলাচল হয়ে গেছে, থাকবো না যাব, ফ্যামিলি মেম্বারসে থেকে যাও ভাই, রোজগারও তো করতে হবে. So this is the issue. And I saw a TV program where in Punjab people were welcoming migrant workers back, return of the migrant, with garlands and putting them on 14 days quarantine. By the way, I can give you my personal example. Within the state of Gujarat, I had a problem with migrant workers. And those migrants were within Gujarat. They were not from outside. Now, I'm coming specifically to the issue of MSME. See, MSME is a very important sector because it employs 12 crore people. It contributes 6.1% of our GDP. Now, I'm just going to elaborate a few measures which have been done for MSME. I'm sure for most of you, I'll be repeating, but permit me to repeat. See, for the sector, I'm not comparing. Actually, if you see 20 lakh crores, MSME got 30% of that. MSME got 6 lakh crores out of the 20 lakh crores. And I'm now going to just elaborate on the major points. Emergency working capital facility, 3 lakh crores, half of it. After all, how do you revive the factory which is closed down, or your business which is closed down? The first and foremost thing you'll need is working capital. There is no two ways about it. I'm sure all of us in this group or others who are listening at various other medium, and they are connected with MSME business or any business, working capital is what you need. And this is what the government has come forward with. Then subordinate debt. Then collateral free loans. It's very clear that at this point of time, where will somebody get collateral? My business has already gone into loss. My assets are depleted. My asset value, what we call asset coverage ratio, has dropped. Where will I get extra asset to take more loans? So collateral free loan. Then there is the scheme where government will provide you guarantee free of guarantee cost. Government will provide you guarantees as good as the government taking responsibility that you will pay. So the question again, why are you giving me loan? What else do you want? Once again, where direct cash flow has been put at your hands. Cash flow has been put, and I'm being very clear about it, for 9 months. 50,000 crores TDS, which has been delayed for MSME. This is not a tax it's not a tax write-off. It's a tax deduction at source. That means you're delaying this payment. So 50,000 crore has been put at your hands or at MSME hands for 9 months. Precisely 9 months, because when the year ends, when the next financial year ends, you will be paying this tax. So again, I'm not saying something that this is a tax reduction. It's a cash flow at your hand, at the hands of MSME. Then a part of the PF contribution for the employees. There are a few provisions which are applicable to MSME and they are applicable to the larger industry also. That a lot of provisions of the Companies Act, which earlier drew criminal liabilities, have been decriminalized. Then, the other where the country will be helped is 90,000 crores being provided to DISCOMs. The fact is that our electricity supply companies were in pathetic conditions because the buyers were not paying. So this definitely gives them the liquidity to run, and which ultimately does help us. So here I would say a direct 6 lakh crore has been earmarked for MSME. One very practical problem which has been covered, and Narayan I think has even pointed out, is banks don't give these loans even if somebody wants to take. This could well be a problem, and not well be, I would say this is, because there are certain comments I've heard, and if you look at the reverse repo balances with the Reserve Bank, this is a clear, shall we say, example that lending is not happening the way it should be, especially what the government of the day, what our Honorable Prime Minister wants, that is not happening. Pressures have to be put on the banks. ये रुपया आपको मिलने का है, बैंक के सामने हर वक्त जाके गिड़गिड़ाइए मत, मैं भी व्यापार में हूं, आपको कभी कभी दबाव बनाना पड़ेगा, और ये मान के चलिए इस दबाव में सरकार पूरा आपके साथ है. So the package that the Prime Minister has announced is I would call it a wholesome package, because I have elaborated MSME. I'm not going to elaborate the other spheres because that's not a subject of discussion. I think all of you want to hear what Swapan will be saying. Is the first part was MSME, then workers, vendors, very important, the street vendors, agriculture, gap funding, migrant workers have a provision, and then finally the corporate sector. You know what? I'm going to end with a few lines of Atalji's Kavita, because I think it fits into our situation like a glove. आओ फिर से दिया जलाएं. Mark the words. आओ फिर से दिया जलाएं, भरी दोपहरी में अंधियारा. We were going out sky high. भरी दोपहरी में अंधियारा, सूरज परछाई से हारा. क्या सूरज कभी हारता है? सूरज परछाई से हारा. अंतरम का नेनु चोड़ें, बूझी हुई बाती सुलगाएं. आओ फिर से दिया जलाएं. We will be successful. Let's join hand. Again, nationalism, patriotism will see us through. Namaste.
Thank you, Bajoria ji. Dr. Dasgupta, please.
Thank you very much, Arup. Thank you, Narayan ji, my friend Shishir Bajoria, the organizers, Calcutta Citizens Initiative, and Rajasthan, Bengal, Maitri Parishad, for giving me this opportunity to speak. Now, I think by and large, by now, a lot of you would have heard what the specific provisions for the MSME sector and what the government's package is. Now, I'm not going to deal with that for two different reasons. Partly because, I think you've heard about those ad nauseum, and I think you've all got your views on whether that actually constitutes a package or doesn't constitute a package, whether it's disappointing or whether more should be done or whether it's adequate. I'm not going to do it. The second reason why I'm not going to deal with it is because I'm not an economist. And I know this is a strange admission for a Bengali, because I think what we've seen in the case of Bengal is that there is an inverse correlation between the number of economists you produce and the state of the economy. And I think Bengal has suffered from the place being too overmanaged by economists. I think what the COVID-19 challenge has highlighted more than anything else is that unless we are not careful, the lopsided development, which Shishirji spoke about, of the East and the Northeast, contributing only 13% of the GDP of this country, that this scope of uneven development, which we've seen in India, is going to get further accentuated. And I think that's one of the logical reasons why the Prime Minister yesterday, in his speech to entrepreneurs and industrialists in Calcutta, actually emphasized the need that an equitable Indian development must need certain extra thrust from the East. And I tell you why, a couple of reasons why this is going to become a more greater issue. At various points, the issue of the migrant labor has been mentioned, more as a sort of story of individual hardship, more as an issue of how much people have suffered, the manner in which they made their way back. Some walked, some got onto trains, some had to wait a while in transit camps. And these stories are all real. And I think there is no discounting the fact that there is a great deal of human suffering which was involved. Now we can go into the thing of whether should they have been given a warning, should the situation demand immediate precipitate action. Without getting into those details, what I think it's important to note is that by recent estimates, anything between 80 lakhs and 1 crore of those who are migrant workers are basically what we can call permanent residents of West Bengal. And that's the figure. That's probably one of the highest figures which is there. And what it basically means is that even if a percentage of this population actually goes back or doesn't necessarily migrate, but actually remains where they are, and some of them go back to their original places of employment, you're still going to be left with a very, very large chunk of people who, in normal circumstances, left West Bengal partly because they didn't have employment opportunities. And that is going to add to the pressure of what is there in Bengal. And it is also very clear that for those who are getting into those who are returning to villages, that in agriculture, partly because of the small parcelization of land in the state, does not offer the scope for adequate opportunities within agriculture. Even those with land holdings necessarily have to find alternative subsidiary means of employment to supplement their income, which is coming from agriculture. That's the pattern in West Bengal. Despite the high productivity growths which have taken place in agriculture, that's basically the thing. So if you take that the amount of surplus labor which is going to be there in the villages, and I add to that those which are going to be there in already overcrowded and somewhat stagnant places, which are urban or semi-urban in West Bengal, you are likely to get into a situation where, unless this issue is dealt with on a war footing, you are likely to come into a position where there could be social turmoil. So it's a pure practical issue I'm really dealing with. West Bengal so far has had a rather unique, and if I may say so, self-defeating strategy to deal with its economy. We've heard about the so-called revival of Bengal now for a very, very long time. I can remember since the time I was in school, finishing school in the early 1970s, we first heard the story about how Bengal has to be revived. And that same story continues. So it's a bit of a piece of old music just being replayed and replayed when we talk about the reclaimed Bengal. And part of the reason for it is that we also know the reasons why Bengal has been stagnant for so long. I needn't go into each of them or the manifestations of all of them, but we know for a fact that stagnation, in fact, the position of decline is what has marked Bengal. And sometimes people in politics are loath to admit that, but the reality is that very few states in the Indian Union have an unending history for the past 50 years of what might be called a secular decline in terms of its growth. And despite this, Bengal is there. It's flourishing in certain parts, but it's not flourishing in the areas in which there is employment potential. So it's been dependent primarily on what might be called a money order economy. The basic income which is there, which is sustaining a large number of people, is remittances from these so-called migrant labor, remittances from outside. Even within the entrepreneurial class, there are large numbers of units in Bengal which have notionally their headquarters in Bengal. They keep their back offices in Bengal. They keep their accounts departments in Bengal. But their units of manufacture are outside Bengal, and increasingly, as I've noticed in the case of a large number of people in Bengal who have their units overseas. So this is basically, so Bengal being a very nice base, but not as an area of operation. So how do we get this to turn around? There's little point in saying Bengal had a very rich heritage at one time. Yes, we know all that. I mean, all that is very well known about it. And I think just going on and on about your heritage only indicates more than ever that your past is brighter than your future. Now, therefore, there are certain low-hanging fruit which is there. And I think we need to identify those. The most important of that low-hanging fruit is the fact that infrastructure in West Bengal is again uneven. There is a large-scale scope for development, particularly in North Bengal. And North Bengal remains one of the more neglected regions of this state. And firstly, therefore, there's a thing of North Bengal which needs the urgent attention. Then we all know that the roads, the airports, the rail, everything in Bengal could do with upgradation. So there is that feature of infrastructure which is there. But the infrastructure, how it is to be availed of, that's a more pressing question. Now, I think over the years, I have read many tracts which have been written by organizations such as the Calcutta Citizens Initiative. I mean, the names vary. But they basically pointed out these are the steps which we could do to take Bengal forward. And they range from the ambitious to the modest. The more modest schemes would have us believe that if you put in your money, put in your effort into, say for instance, upgrading the sort of value addition in sort of mango production, and have great, then Malda would become a great center of making pickles and anything based in mangoes. Now that's interesting. Some of the low down the value chain of agriculture. But I don't think that's necessarily going to attend to the problems which we are likely to see in the future. The basic issue which everybody who is anybody and who have some amount of surplus capital to invest has pointed out inevitably is the fact that the atmosphere and the environment in West Bengal is not conducive to any form of meaningful economic investment. I'm putting it as bluntly as possible. That Bengal is a difficult state, that the Bengalis are better off being employed outside Bengal than they are within the state, and that for all said and done, this is a state which is better off as a consumer rather than as a producer. And I think this is a story which is recurrent. Now, how do we arrest this perception is, to my mind, one of the largest concerns. And I think the bitter experience of what happened to Tata Motors in Singur rankles. A setback like that is of such a great magnitude that it takes decades before it can. In the past, it was thought that with the growth of the IT sector, Bengal, with its very large crop of the highly skilled people, would be a natural haven for the IT sector. And in fact, that infrastructure which exists on the outskirts of Kolkata in the sort of new town is remarkably good. But the reality is that apart from a few branch offices, it's still nowhere compared to what is there in Hyderabad. It is nowhere compared to Bangalore, and it's nowhere compared to even Chennai. So under no circumstances has Calcutta managed to get it. And the same story comes on. This is a lovely city. Calcutta is a lovely city. It's got all the infrastructure. It's got all the basic facilities which cities want. But it has ended up being, for all practical purposes, almost like a retirement home for people. And that's the anecdotal evidence that presents itself. So at the end of the day, you come back to that same point over and over and over again. Where is the environment which will allow us to make this? Today, governments cannot force investment. This is something which I think is quite clear, but which the political class never sort of actually explicitly says. But I think which people like you who are here, who've dealt with business, who've dealt with money, should know. That the governments can actually be facilitators, they can encourage you to do this. And this is one of the reasons why you've had many business summits in West Bengal where publicly a lot of entrepreneurs and industrialists or corporate houses have said, okay, we are going to invest so and so 100 crores. But those 100 crores never really show up. Because the same inhibition, which I'm talking about, also governs them. So some amount of loose change is probably diverted into West Bengal and kept it. Now, this is not going to make any material difference. So if we have to realistically come back to this question of how is this environment going to change? One of the questions which I might also add in this question is the issue on which this entire Singur thing episode rankled so much is the question of land. Everyone says, where's the land? Because agricultural land, the conversion of agricultural land into manufacturing thing, it might happen in small places here and there. But it is a problem because it's of this fertility of the land in here. And not very many people are interested in going and setting up units, particularly MSMEs, in Western Midnapur or Jhargram district, where land is available, where, very sort of non-fertile land is available because the other corresponding, the associated features which associated with are linked with life are not there. So perforce, we are going to have development concentrated in this greater Calcutta belt. We're going to have it concentrated in parts of North Bengal, which is in and around Siliguri. That's the reality of the situation in the short term. In the long term, it could be a different story altogether. Now, one of the issues in which West Bengal has failed abysmally, the successive governments in West Bengal either have lacked the political will or the drive or the inclination, is to seriously attend to the question of what do you do with the spate of closed industries which is there across the Hooghly and all over. The land I'm talking about. Land as a national resource, land as a very precious asset, which is a national asset, which is being squandered in this particular. The other day, I happened to be in, about 3-4 months ago, I happened to be in Hind Motors, once the largest automobile company in Asia, and now a wreck, a wasteland, an industrial wasteland, the classic example of the Rust Belt, as you can find. Now, this sort of a waste. And then you have people asking, where is the land? You have ready-made infrastructure and wasted, and the assets which are wasted. Now, unless governments, and this is where the governments come in, the role of the government comes in. Unless a government can actually combine its political will with a determination to attend to features like this, the renewal of this urban renewal on a war footing, and get whatever legislation is possible and get it through whichever level, at parliament, the state legislature, we will not be seeing this. So certain drastic actions of this is necessary. The other drastic action which I might suggest to you, which is also necessary, is that while West Bengal is not renowned for mega corruption, it has certainly carved out a reputation for itself in the art of petty corruption of a highly irritating and pernicious nature. This form of extortion, which is there, and you can understand what is the logic behind this. When you don't have enough, the cake is shrinking. So the drive to get more and more out of this, with the result that most welfare schemes in West Bengal don't necessarily reach the end user, and that people who are in office find equally innovative measures of actually trying to defeat the influence of technology when it comes into the redistribution and welfare schemes. And this is something which will affect, and this in turn vitiates the environment even further and makes it not very conducive to any form of healthy investment. It's not mega corruption I'm talking about. As we well know, the amount of money involved is probably not, but the irritation and the headache and the harassment which is there is not commensurate with the effort people put. So that's a very, very big thing. And the final issue which has to be attended very much is that this contrived battleground which has been created, and I use the word contrived, battleground which has been created between what the center wants and what the state wants. Half the energies of West Bengal are taken away by saying, no, the center cannot intrude. My personal experience of dealing with various ministries tells me that in most of the time when you ask, why isn't this particular thing being implemented in West Bengal? And remember, in most cases, the implementing agency is always the state government. The inevitable answer which accompanies it is one thing: they never reply to our letters. And that's a fact. So there is a sense of utter exasperation in certain parts, which says, look, you dealing with West Bengal is too much of a headache. So even within the bureaucracy, which in any case is accustomed to headaches, you find this. So as I say, and I'm not going to take up too much more time, but in a nutshell, what I would like to re-emphasize is that post-COVID, and if there is, or it might, there is, with COVID, I don't know really when we can talk about a post-COVID situation. That only depends on circumstances which are not really within our control. As we move along with this COVID environment, we are likely to get a renewed and a unique form of pressure in West Bengal, which is likely to upset the equilibrium which had been created by this money order remittance economy, some sort of a fragile truce which had existed for so long. And that is likely to break down. And the social pressures which are likely to be on the system are going to accentuate. Therefore, the need to do something on a far more urgent basis becomes even that much more compelling. In these circumstances, unless there is awareness and heightened awareness in the political culture of West Bengal, and I'm not talking about one party or another party, etc. I'm talking about the larger political culture of West Bengal, of the need to create an environment which is conducive to this, where the depth of seriousness is called for, where an application that to show a political will to actually attend to some of these features, to inject some of those reforms which have been there which have been introduced, and actually ensure that they are implemented. Unless these things are done, we are likely to face a very, very gloomy situation. That's why my own entire appeal is that rather than see West Bengal become like another Ireland where there are more Irishmen outside Ireland than there are in Ireland itself, and we don't want a situation, unless we want a situation where there are more Provashis than there are Bashindas, I think we need to have a very serious wake-up call. The slumber has gone on. The complacency has gone on. The smugness has gone on for 50 years or more. And along with it has come the state of utter decline. And if we are to arrest that decline, we have to actually think of something far more purposeful politically than we've ever thought of in the past. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I don't know how much I've addressed the subject, but at least I've, when it comes to this, I always like to speak from my heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dasgupta. You did cover a lot of points, and I can see there are a lot of questions and a lot of queries, especially for you, Swapan. But before that, I have a few questions and a few observations to make. Of course, I do agree with you that we cannot always be speaking about Bengal's cultural and intellectual strengths, right? And there also needs to be an economic and industrial strengths of the state also. And I, as a Bengali, although I am a Bengali, I grew up in the military. And so I spent all my life outside Bengal. So as an outsider's perspective, I completely do agree with you. And I also found your point very interesting about this sort of clash between the center and West Bengal, which hinders Bengal's development. And perhaps what we need at this time is something what Mr. Vajpayee the former Prime Minister Vajpayee was very well known for. That is perhaps more compromise we need from Bengal side rather than from the center side. I do agree with you. I also found very interesting what Narayan ji and Shishir ji said, especially Shishir ji's points about the inequitable development, which Swapan also touched upon, inequitable development and how the South has developed more. We know that the South and parts of the North and West since 1991 liberalization States like Gujarat, states like Punjab, Haryana, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, they have attracted way more investment than Bengal has. And that's why it has all led to this migration. But it's also a fact that because of socio-economic conditions, a Kannadiga or a Punjabi or a Tamilian will charge much higher wages than a Bengali or a Bihari would for the same work. So that is a very valid point, which basically adding on to what Mr. Shishir said. And so that's where my first question comes from. A social compact, a social and economic compact was broken. The states, the center, and the employers tried their best, but as Narayanji said, there was a fear factor, right? And the migrants wanted to head back home. The migrant laborers wanted to go back home in mass, and most of them have been able to go back home. How deeply has this social compact been broken now that industry is restarting? Do we expect them to come back soon, or will that take time? And if I speak specifically about Bengal, this might sound like a very insensitive question, but business is all about taking advantage. Is there an advantage here for businessmen from Bihar, from Bengal, from Odisha, and from Northeast? Now that the labor is mostly back, is that a labor surplus for you? Can you hire them at wages which might not be as much as, say, what a Bombay or a Delhi or a Bangalore businessman can pay them, but still, can you pay them in a wages so that they don't have to migrate? Sure, any one of you can answer that.
Prabhanda, shall I take this question?
Yeah, please.
Arup, your question is very, very right. So basically, there's an arbitrage situation. That there is an opportunity that the workers are here. Now, what do you do with the workers? There is no industry. See, the decline of Bengal is not 34 plus 9. The decline of Bengal had another 10 years. It actually started from the day Naxal movement started. Flight of capital took place from then. See, okay, as a businessman, let me give you one thing which I'm sure everybody will agree. That forget a factory, forget a big business. Even if you open a chota se chota dukan, if you are unsure of the safety, will you put that money? Because for that person running a pawn shop, that 10,000 rupees is his life's savings, is most dear to him. If my physical safety is not there, which actually eroded from Naxal days, and it never came back, because we started celebrating Shilpur Kalo Hath Bhenge Dao. Again, I always say in every platform, I was involved with the same movement, the Red Movement, for 15 years. So I know exactly what it was. So now today, Bengal's industry has come to a point that the industrial revival has to happen. The unfortunate situation of the migrant workers who have come back is that for livelihood, they have to go back. That is the harsh reality. All the growth centers in Bengal, how many are functioning? That's the harsh reality. That's it.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question you asked. And I mean, firstly, let me thank Shishir for his public display of atonement for his past, misdeeds of the past. I think that's highly overdue. No, if we had to look at it one way, firstly, I think what is after COVID and after the government's policies, what we are likely to see is a certain redefinition of supply chains in India. And supply chains would also mean labor as a very, very important input. Now, West Bengal is not the only player in this region. Let me just disabuse the notion that just because Calcutta happens to be the largest city, it is the only player. I think a far important player which is coming up and which may come up in the future is going to be Orissa. Because it has taken the environment of Orissa is is proving to be far more attractive in way. For instance, take the fact that how Orissa is developed, a place like Bhubaneswar has developed as an education hub, something which should have naturally been the prerogative of Bengal, but it hasn't. Now, certainly the opportunities of, say, for instance, a section of the gems and jewelry industry based in Jaipur or based in Surat, relocating to places from where the labor comes from is a very easy, attractive proposition. But against that, what Shishirji just pointed about, the question of security, the wholesome environment, the type of pressures, you've got to factor that in. And against that, you're finding also Bhubaneswar attractive. Likewise, again, be vocal about local and the trend towards value addition in, say, for instance, the tea sector. Unless we can put North Bengal, very much develop the infrastructure there in a far greater sort of way and make it actually an integral part, the linkages with Assam. That's the type of opportunities which we need to do. So there is, at one level, I feel, the need for a certain coordinated development between Assam, Northeast, Orissa, Bihar, and West Bengal. Because we are talking about really redefining the supply chains of this thing. And that requires, again, certain political initiatives, a certain enlargement of your vision. And let's hope that sometime it should come about. Because, I mean, if it doesn't, I feel the biggest gainer is going to be Orissa. That's my personal feeling about this.
Swapan, would you address the first part of my question? Like, across, for leaving aside East, like let's take the entire country. How badly has the social compact been broken between state and employer on one hand and the worker on the other?
No, I don't think it's been broken. I think there's the basic, from whatever things, the reason why there was a mass exodus, in some cases flight, of migrant labor had less to do, in some cases it had something to do with those very, very workers whose, employers, one-shop employers, just shut shop and went away. I mean, there was a small percentage of that. But it was not to do with starvation. It had not to do with an absolute level of deprivation. But it had more to do with this emotional trauma of uncertainty which accompanied that.
The fear factor.
Yeah, the fear factor, you can call it. And it was that emotional trauma which propelled it. And, pressure from home also. It's not really them being drawn home, it's people from home actually pulling them back. And it's, look, and mind you, this is not something which is confined to only within India. Look at the quantum of exodus from the Gulf.
True, very true.
Just look at that also.
Kerala had a lot of people came back to Kerala. Yes.
Kerala has more than 1 lakh which has come back. But that's, I mean, more and more are coming back with each thing, with each flight. So it's really that. And I think, of course, in days to come, we'll be able to study. But I don't think this compact has been broken. What has happened is this emotional trauma, which is fear, as you call it.
All right. Now we will take some audience questions. We have a question from Mr. Tapan Guptu, and he was asking a very interesting question. This is for Dr. Dasgupta. He's talking about Bengal, but I will generally talk about all the states, including Bengal. A lot of states have said that we have dues from the center, whether it's GST compensation or other compensation, which will help us in this fight for COVID-19 and as well as in other areas. Now, the West Bengal government is claiming anything between 25 to 40,000 crore. Other states are claiming other things. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is also what although the Honorable Finance Minister did promise, and she has promised many times, then this is my question. This is in addition to his question. This is my question. That the MSMEs will get the pending dues, pending payments from the central government and the PSUs. However, there is a huge differences there. While some MSME bodies are saying that we are owed between 2 to 3 lakh crore rupees by the central government and PSUs. The central government says, as per our database, we only owe you some 40,000 crore rupees. So where does this discrepancy come from? So obviously the center's revenue position is stretched because of the economic slowdown. But how can the center best address these pending demands from PSUs, from MSMEs and from states?
I think it's important to point out that there is at this stage that there was a particular approach which was taken by the center, which is that in this sort of a crisis, you could have a handout strategy. Okay, there was a certain quantum of handouts which were there. And that was more, some of it was given in the basis of cash. Some of it was given in the paint of food grains or free rations.
Narega and PM Kisan.
Those sort of things. But by and large, the approach has been that you create the resources, you create a certain enabling environment whereby people can somehow get along. And you give them that facilitation. Now, in the process of creating that facilitation, you're likely to have a lot of things. The point about the banks, which Narayan spoke about, is very well taken all over the country. We are seeing that same thing. Bankers are either not being unresponsive to this. In Bengal, you have a standard feature from a lot of people who go in for these, ask about these schemes. He says, "Amader kache keu kichu circular ashini." It's a sort of a template answer which you are getting from very people, not so much within Kolkata, but outside Kolkata. So there's that. Then this entire question of dues, PSU dues. What the PSU owes to MSMEs. Now, the point is you open the tap. That's the thing. Just like income tax refunds. I don't know, Narayanji will be able to tell us how many of people actually are getting the refunds which they promised. To enable some form of liquidity into the system. And these are short-term crisis management steps. So that liquidity to come into the system. But there are these longer-term issues. What they've done is they've combined. A lot of people said, why did they include space in this 20,000 crore?
Actually, I wanted to ask because Shishir sir listed those measures. So this is my question both to Dr. Dasgupta and Shishir ji. A lot of these steps across sectors, aviation, coal, aerospace and others, which he announced on day 4. Out of 5 days, it was on day 4 that she announced these steps. We have a prime minister who's come back with the biggest majority in 35 or more years. We probably have the most powerful prime minister with the most powerful mandate in independent India. So why did these measures have to wait for the pandemic?
Well, the answer to that is very simple. Because the political class as a whole has never been committed to reforms. And that's a very harsh truth I'm telling you. That take the coal issue, which I think Shishirji pointed out. Now, the first initial steps towards deregulating and breaking the state monopoly of coal, which had happened during the time of the late Mohan Kumaramangalam, actually happened in a very tentative sort of way in 2014. But the actual announcement to flesh it out, etc., has taken this much and a crisis.
Yeah.
And a crisis. For it to be there, because in crisis, the resistance wanes. Remember, it was the balance of payments crisis in 1991.
A crisis brings out reforms.
Which is basically, we love to get it done by gunpoint.
Yes.
By and large, I repeat my point. The Indian politician is by and large against reform. And this cuts across the political spectrum. On both sides, I've seen it, my personal experience in Parliament tells you that. They will not. One thing they're very glad about is that because of the particular crisis, the privatization of Air India has been stalled. And Air India has actually fulfilled a certain social service in this.
Yes.
They're very happy because the biggest opposition to the privatization of Air India was within Parliament. Everybody.
Very, very good point, sir. So we have some more questions, and some questions are coming on the issue of the banks and the loans. Right, the finance minister has given her assurance; she has announced the schemes, but there is a lot of especially from the private banks, there is a lot of cases where the loans are not being cleared, and there are overzealous credit officers, and are various issues that small businesses are facing. Mr. Pradeep Khaitan has a similar question. So if Mr. Jain and Mr. Bajoria can talk about announcement versus implementation, and that has been a problem, not just in this government but across governments. In the case of the 3 lakh crore credit guarantee scheme for MSMEs, is the implementation found wanting, especially at the level of the banks, at the branches?
The answer in simple English is yes. There's no doubt about it. And this problem is not just in this pandemic or in this crisis. See, first of all, a banker by nature wants to lend money to someone who does not want to borrow. This is the basic dharma of a banker. And will never look at a person, a borrower who wants to borrow, who needs borrowing. Now, this is keeping this problem as a truth in our country. Let me share one program, and these were in real life days, not in virtual, in our Zooming days, as I'm calling. I was sitting in Delhi in a program. I was speaking with the chairman of a very large bank. I don't want to name. And this gentleman, in his speech, he very, very proudly says, "We have stopped lending." I happened to be the next speaker, and this was a panel discussion. I asked him a question. "Sir, my business is selling refractories. Your business is lending money. I also have bad debts. Do I have the luxury of stopping to sell? Your money is your work in process. My refractory pieces are my work in process. I have to, it is my job, it is my duty to choose the buyer, no? But I don't have the luxury to stop selling." I asked this question. There was a third person sitting on the panel. There was a lady from an economic department of the government. She agreed with me. Now, this is a harsh reality. So what do we do? See, the fact is that the finance minister has to lean on the bank's chairman. She has started doing this exercise. It is not going to be easy. They are resisting. And they will bring hundreds of reasons. But this, again, as Swapan said about the political, resistance to change, to reform, bankers will also have to go through this. Because let me ask you one question. Which one bank, public sector bank's chairman, salary is dependent on the bank's performance? None. And that is the reason. I'm making a statement which in public sector is a non-starter. But so the only way out is that our finance minister, and by the way, I'm again repeating, she is leaning on them. It will take time, ye hoga. And I'm just for a minute going back to what you said. Why did this pandemic was needed for these announcements to be made? When you said, especially the day 4 announcement. It's in a roundabout way, it's connected with this. हिंदी में कहावत है, आविष्कार की जननी आवश्यकता है. आवश्यकता ही आविष्कार की जननी है. When it was needed, वो हुआ.
And it is a very good English translation also.
Exactly.
Necessity is the mother
of all inventions.
Yes. All right. We have a lot of questions. We have questions about Bengal, which I'll touch upon last, especially for Dr. Dasgupta. But one fascinating question that I've had from Dr. Dipankar Adhya. This is for both Shishir ji and Swapan. What is your observation to communal factors in dampening the drive for development and delivery? He's asking specifically actually he's not asking in regards to any state. He's asking generally. Communal factors, whether they're political or social, how do they impact development and delivery? That's a very fascinating question.
Well, I mean, in theory, any form of social strife hinders investment process.
True.
It makes people a little nervous. And communal we can take as one of them. It could be other factors, it could be communal, it could be anything. And particularly those people who write reports. I mean, there's an entire class of people whose job it is not to invest, not to actually get their hands dirty in business, but to write reports. And for them, that's a very important factor because that's something they can easily seize upon. But it's in reality, India is a very large country. There are certain areas which are marred by strife. You know, take an example of, I'll give you two examples where maybe this has not, you know, where I think communal tensions have certainly marred development. One is the town of Malegaon in Maharashtra, which was once upon a time a very important center of cotton, which is now really a town in great terminal decline. And I could attribute that completely to, you know, communal strife. Uttar Pradesh suffered quite a lot from it. The manner in which law and order has improved in UP is probably one of the lesser publicized stories of the past 5 years, past 4 years or so, 3 years or whatever the thing is. That, and therefore, a state which was again known for strife and where development was basically concentrated in that greater, in the national capital region and even parts of it which spilled over to Uttar Pradesh. We are likely to see a greater degree of involvement in other parts of Western UP. Eastern UP is still going to take some time.
All right.
But I think there is no single answer to that. But Gujarat was once also known for a lot of communal strife, once upon a time. But post 2002, this has not marred any development or investment there.
True, very true.
So there's no textbook answer, there's no template answer. It is really dependent on circumstances.
All right. We have a question from KS Adhikari of Concern for Calcutta. Now, because of all the closed industry and the shutdown industries in Bengal, and he's giving the example of Durgapur, but I think it applies throughout Bengal. There's a substantial land parcel and closed industry. So using that available infrastructure, that available land parcel and the trained workforce, how quickly can new infrastructure and new industry be set up in Bengal? And any of the three participants can answer that question.
Chopanda, the day we went to Hind Motors, I think that's the point which you said.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first, thing in Hind Motors which struck you. I mean, what a waste. I mean, okay, you're not likely to get the ambassador car back in operation any longer. Nor are you likely to see only a sort of automobile industry of such a grand scale replicating itself in Hind Motors. But at least 30 MSME units can come up, whether it's to do with warehousing, whether it's to do with light engineering, because the communication linkages are so good there. And you've got to also look at it in a slightly more enlarged way and look at it that housing too is part of your infrastructure.
Yeah.
So don't totally think about, nuts and bolts and, welding machines and things like that. Think about it in a far greater sense of it. Those are the things. So the opportunities. Now, land, as I keep saying, is really the most precious commodity in Bengal, in particular. And when you've got it, you've got to address it on a war footing. I mean, there's just no justification across when you look at those closed engineering factories, the old Jessops, the old Burns, the old, the old British companies which closed down sometime in the 60s and 70s. The jute mills which have closed down. They have to be given. I mean, I'm sure everybody in your audience has greater sort of familiarity with that than I have. But it's remarkable. It's very unfortunate that for so many years we have not yet dealt with this problem through certain types of legislation which can circumvent these frozen assets.
Understood. Now we are getting very interesting.
Arup, just 1 second. I'll just give one number. What Shapanda said about land in West Bengal, and we all know that land is a scarce commodity in West Bengal. All India average of sowing is 45% of the land. Bengal, the 3 states which are known to be arid districts, is 52%, 54%, 56%. That is where land is in short supply.
Okay, understood. I have an interesting question on the whole decision-making process. Right now, the FM announces on the MSM on the loans for MSME, and the definition of MSMEs is changed. And this is from one of our audience here. And but when you go to the bank says that we have not yet received the definition from the MSME ministry. We have not received the updated list because you change the MSME definition, more companies become MSME. Right? You go to the bureaucrat says there is no official notification from the government side yet. Right? And so these kind of decision-making gaps, and ultimately they impact the MSME, the employer, and as well as the employee on the ground. So if any one of you can just comment on that, what needs to improve such, this whole chain of decision-making from the finance minister to the banker. And of course, there is the bureaucrat, there is the Indian Administrative Service in between. If any of you can answer that question.
You see, if I may say, Arup, basically, you see, there is a certain way banks have been functioning. You see, during all times when the private banks were there, I'm not naming any bank, so they were habituated, you see, help me to help you. I need not say more. So their attitude towards the nation, towards the industry, towards the business need to undergo a sea change. Their role is not only to collect big salary packet. Their job is also to act on the instruction of the government of India, which they must do. And for that mechanism, whatever is to be done, that should be done by the Honorable Finance Minister and by the RBI Governor.
Okay. This is probably the last question, and this is for Swapanda only. A lot of people are asking this question. What is the way forward for Bengal? We have known what has been the problem with Bengal. We have known, how, although, different governments have tried different things, somehow they have not worked. We know the brain drain and the labor drain, which is Bengal. So what is the way forward? And there is a question, number of people asking this question. And this is for Swapanda.
Yeah, look, at the risk of sounding extremely partisan, which I am, and I confess to having a sense of partisanship on this. I think the essence of it has to be a certain mind change, a mindset change in how you deal with politics. I think today in Bengal, we have set our visions, what in Bangla is called choto mon. We are looking at it really in terms of a parai, a ward, this, that. My personal experience of it is that sometimes people can't think of a ward number 5 eta hoiche. To them, that is the universe. And if the administration boils down to micromanagement of puja committees, you're not going to deal with the bigger problems. So that mindset change, it has taken very long. It took very long for Bengal to realize it was in decline. The decline may have started, as Shishir ji rightly pointed out, in 1967. But I think it was not till the 1990s when the reality of decline actually crept in. Today it's understood. That's one thing which is great. That only when you realize that you're in decline can you even start rebuilding your efforts. So I think more than anything else, it's that your mindset change as far as governance is concerned, putting governance on top. And governance includes things like having a wholesome law and order situation. So I would say that without fleshing out this answer in any way, I mean, one can get into specifics about various things. That social strife, which is really political strife in Bengal, more than anything else. I mean, every day, I mean, it's really recurrent, and it's the extent of violence which is seeped into the system is just astonishing. And that cannot go on.
All right.
And therefore, that sort of repairing of that social relationship and a certain mindset, seriousness towards the issues of governance and linkage with the rest of India.
All right. Understood. I think we are at the end of this extremely informative and very, knowledgeable discussion that we have had. Thank you, Narayan ji. Thank you, Shishir ji, Dr. Dasgupta. As usual, it's such a pleasure to hear you. And I also thank all the participants and all the audience for their informative points and questions. And once again, I would like to thank everyone for attending this Business Standard Smart Business event, which we have done along with Concern for Calcutta, Rajasthan, Bengal, Maitri, Parishad, and Calcutta Citizens Initiative. Thank you so much.
A small word of thanks to our technical partners again. They have ensured that our today's session is not only on Zoom,
of course.
But on every form of social media. RITAM Bangla is been really helping us, and a very big thanks to them.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Arup, Puja, I think Puja, we can have formal.
She's not there.